Before his death in the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn was learning an ancient Force technique that allowed Jedi to preserve their identity after death. Essentially, he was learning how to become a Force spirit. But because he didn't finish his training before his untimely death at the hands of Maul, initially he was only able to manifest as a disembodied voice. Over time, and despite having perished, he continued his training from the netherworld of the Force, and by the time of the Kenobi show, he fully completed the transformation and was able to physically manifest. As we know, he taught this ability to both Obi-Wan and Yoda. In this way, Qui-Gon was a pioneer of the Jedi Force Ghost path, and this was achieved through a deep communion with the living and cosmic Force. But did you know, according to new canon, Qui-Gon appears to Obi-Wan at the end of A New Hope. This takes place right after Obi-Wan's death at the hands of Vader. Qui-Gon comforts his former Padawan and helps guide him in his transition to become a Force ghost. This information comes from the Amazing from a Certain Point of View trilogy, which expands our understanding of episodes 4, 5, and 6. These are collections of short stories from different characters, but the narrative focus is different. It's not focused on the heroes, but rather the background characters and countless overlooked voices that populate the Star Wars galaxy. In regards to the Qui-Gon information, it might surprise you, but it doesn't come from the A New Hope version, but instead from A Certain Point of View Return of the Jedi. Before appearing to Luke on Dagobah following Yoda's death, Obi-Wan recalls what it was like becoming a Force ghost, and he describes it as serene and full of warmth. And Obi-Wan remembers what Qui-Gon said to him after he died at the hands of Vader. Here is how the short story from the book goes. The sodden heat reached Obi-Wan from a strange remove. This wasn't his first trip to Dagobah, but it pained him to think of the last time. It was nowhere near as hot as Tatooine, but the humidity amplified the temperature by several degrees. An algal mist thickened the air. The Force was very strong. It swirled and eddied, breathing with a slow pulse, drifting like ancient sands. It was little wonder Yoda chose this planet for his refuge. A lesser Jedi of lower repute would find themselves overwhelmed by extra physical pressure. It was a real testament to Luke's untrained power that he hadn't been bowled over by it in the moment he drew near with his X-Wing. The boy was determined, and in the eyes of Obi-Wan, was the last hope for the Jedi. As far as Obi-Wan had come, as much as he had seen, he still felt a loss. And what a fool he had been. So arrogant to think he could train another impulsive, headstrong Jedi. For most Jedi, to learn how to communicate with and use the Force was a process of discovery. But for Luke and his father before him, Anakin, their passion and sense of justice made them vulnerable to the dark side. This is why Obi-Wan was cautious. He had to find a way to communicate effectively with the young man. The stakes were impossibly high, and Obi-Wan knew that Luke felt adrift. Through the Force, Obi-Wan could see the old Jedi Master Yoda glowing inside his hut. Luke was with him in his final moments, and while the boy was usually the brightest, most intense light around, Yoda's flame rivaled his own, and Obi-Wan felt the planet of Dagobah gasp as Yoda became one with the Force. It was done. And so here's the important bit, my dear friends. As Kenobi felt Yoda's ascent, his memory transported him back to his own death. The fateful day where his own apprentice, now turned Darth Vader, struck him down. In a moment of self-sacrifice, Obi-Wan drew upon his training from Master Qui-Gon on Tatooine. He applied what he had learned near the end of his exile. He felt no pain at the hand of Vader's lightsaber as it sliced into his flank. He felt a brief flash of heat, he heard a hissing sound, and for an instant, he smelt burning flesh. But the aroma disappeared as quickly as it came. He then had a realization. He left his robes behind him. Without panic, Obi-Wan began his ascent to becoming a Force spirit. He fell into an ocean of sense and memory, sinking further and further down. His life flashed before him. He remembered being taken to the Jedi Temple as a child. He remembered his training. He remembered his master's death. And then he himself becoming a master to Anakin. An expanse of darkness lay below him, ready to catch and warp him. But instead of being caught by it, he sank through the brightness. He felt a gust of warmth, as if the Force itself was embracing him. And then, as he saw his robes fall to the ground, he heard the familiar voice of his old Jedi Master. Qui-Gon spoke to him. "Your preparations have proven effective, Obi-Wan. It is good to see you again, old friend." Obi-Wan had followed all of Qui-Gon's steps, a further 9 years on Tatooine training for this moment. So that conversation took place in A New Hope, and now Obi-Wan is remembering it in Return of the Jedi, before talking with Luke and revealing the truth about Vader and his sister Leia. Obi-Wan hesitated. It was an uncomfortable moment. Outside of Yoda's hut, Obi-Wan sensed that Yoda told Luke the truth about his father, but he knew the kind of conversation that was to come. He knew Luke was unstable, confused, uncertain about his emotions. And for so long, Obi-Wan was adamant that Luke should not learn the truth until his training was complete. But now they found themselves in a very dire situation. Obi-Wan knew what was to come. He knew that Luke had to face Vader again, but Luke was conflicted. How could he kill his own father? Obi-Wan knew this wasn't going to be easy. For Luke to learn the truth, so suddenly, so soon before his final test, could send him down the path of darkness. The danger was still there, but Obi-Wan also sensed an openness, a waiting inside his pupil. This time things would be different. Luke was not destined to go down the path that Anakin took. Even in Luke's grief and loneliness, Obi-Wan sensed surely there was a way to get through to him. Now that he'd become one with the Force, Obi-Wan had a different perception of past, present, and future. Luke was in distress. Obi-Wan had to plan his words carefully. He knew he needed to be like his own master, Qui-Gon Jinn, be resourceful with his words and have empathy, advise Luke where it's needed, but not take a rigid stand. Before he could speak, Obi-Wan found his next words easily through the will of the Force. And so as we see in the movie, he announces to Luke, "Yoda will always be with you." Luke's head turned. "Why didn't you tell me?" A sense of urgency and panic filled Luke's mind. For a moment, in Obi-Wan's eyes, it was as if Anakin was stood before him, returned from darkness and death. "You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father." In this moment, and yes my dear friends, this is canon, Obi-Wan remembered telling Leia about their parents. But now the twins were much older, and Luke was in a very different position, and so he chose his words carefully. "Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view." Obi-Wan sensed the struggle and anger within Luke's heart, a roiling sea of surging emotion. Another very interesting addition this book contributes is it tells us more about Obi-Wan's inner monologue. And in this moment, he was thinking of Anakin, and the book says, quote, "Obi-Wan wondered so many times what would have happened if before Mustafar, he took Anakin by the shoulders and said, 'Don't destroy yourself to punish the Order for our failures. You're worth so much more than this.'" Every time Obi-Wan saw Luke, he saw Anakin. It's a very interesting passage, and as you can see my dear friends, through the book trilogy from a certain point of view, Qui-Gon's impact can be felt long after his death. What do you guys think? Do you enjoy these canon retcons, filling in these gaps? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, as always, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.